I'll lower the camera a little bit. Can't see my gut. There, that's good. It is time to denounce Macrobius in the strongest possible terms for his provocative behavior, and to warn everyone in the circle of trust that Macrobius represents a clear and present danger to them all. And I have an excellent track record on predicting these things. And going back years and years to talk about Charlottesville, and I predicted that Kurt Doolittle was a fraud. And this is one of the reasons I bring this up. Is well, before that, I even predicted John Mark was a fraud. Nobody wants to remember John Mark. I think people specifically don't want to remember John Mark specifically because I am the one who originally called him a fraud and a phony. And of course, everybody scoffed at that. They scoffed when I said he was a fraud and a phony. They scoffed when I said Kurt Doolittle was a fraud and a phony. And, when these people are proven to be frauds, everybody just gets real quiet and pretends that it never happened, that I was never right and that they never followed these people. And this is the primary problem of our age, in that there are no consequences for wrong actions. If there were mortal consequences for wrong actions, then people would not be able to get away with this kind of behavior. But there are not mortal consequences for wrong actions, and this is the whole problem with our society today. Fortunately, we have other ways of dealing with frauds, as I will demonstrate tonight. And I recently saw James Bowery posting on Twitter. I used to like to read James Bowery on his blog and on Majority Rights. And at one point, James Bowery, who is unfortunately, his problem has always been himself. And one time he said Kurt Doolittle was way smarter than him. And I'm thinking, that's insane. That's utterly insane. For one thing, Kurt Doolittle is fat. Smart people are not fat. Look at me. Do I look fat? No smart person is fat. That is a point of fact. And second of all, no smart person is going to appear in public demonstrating their weight like Kurt Doolittle did. So, that being said, the other problem in today's society, there are two problems: lack of sufficient executions and lack of slavery. Those two issues. And there are a lot of people who should be cleaning my boots who are looked up to and revered simply for unknown reasons, so to speak. They're revered for unknown reasons. I put in mind of James Mason's character in a Lee Marvin movie. He says, when this is all over, you will still be cleaning my boots. And he tells this to the guy who is currently his jailer, who has arrested him. He says, "When no matter who wins in the end, you will be cleaning my boots," which is kind of ironic because he's a supposedly Mexican living in Mexico, but he has James Mason's English accent, so it's kind of one of those ironies of the Italian spaghetti westerns. That being said, at the end of this, a lot of people are uniquely suited and talented for the one express purpose of cleaning my boots, and they always need cleaning. So, with their tongues preferably. But the reason I thought I'd start this broadcast, I thought I'd start it with a example. And it's a good example for a lot of people who can't understand parables. A parable is a proper way. They can't understand parables. They can't understand my way of explaining things. So I talk in parables like Christ did. Not that I'm comparing myself to Christ. Think about got this. But I make this an allegory. The fora is a lifeboat adrift on the open sea. Yes. And so we go to what was the Finnish guy? Not Mackie. He had the lifeboat ethics theory, and he basically says, if you're in a lifeboat in the open sea, and there are people in the water all around you, and there's so many people in the water, and you are rowing with your crew, or whoever people manage to get into the lifeboat, and all these people are trying to get on board the lifeboat, and their hands are so many that they threaten to capsize the lifeboat. At this point, the man who cares about human life is a man that, I need the ashtray, will take a hatchet and start lopping off the hands that cling to the lifeboat. And this is very interesting because this is kind of where I'm going with this deal, but we call it the macrobian dilemma. And it's also an example of the midwit, the ideal midwit analogy, or the midwit scale, so to speak, that they talk about on Twitter quite a lot. So imagine the fora as a boat on the open sea, and this it's a small boat, like a rowboat that they have lowered off the sinking ship, and Flack is at the wheel, or whatever amounts to wherever you steer the boat. Flack is there steering the boat, and Peter is at the prow praying. He's praying, because he's going to pray us out of this problem. He's not bothering to row; he's just praying. And Prack is telling them what he's going to do with the flare pistol. He's going to shoot. He's going to shoot this flare pistol so high and accurately that it's going to impact one of the satellites and draw attention to them and their plight on the open sea. Now, Dr. Alan James is sitting on the gunwales lighter and proclaiming that it's all the Jews' fault. And only that Russian guy I interviewed is bothering to row. And that's when I pass by on a helicopter and say, "Throw Mac overboard, toss him overboard." And this brings us to the classic midwit scale dilemma. Throw, a you'll have a retard on one end of the scale saying, yes, throw Mac overboard. He is fat and he impedes the progress of the boat. We're not going to be able to save ourselves with Mac on board, especially with only one guy rowing. And of course, Mac, if he were the guy he claimed himself to be, he would be saying, "Yes, throw me overboard. Give these young people a chance. I've lived a good life. I'm right with God. Maybe God will send a whale to swallow me up. Just toss me overboard. Don't worry about it." But no, he is slyly saying, "Oh, you might keep me around a few days. You might need to eat me," knowing that there's no way any of these guys have the nerve to butcher him. And where there's life, there's hope. So, but that's going to be Mac's answer to that. And then, so on one end, we have the dimwit saying, "Yeah, Mac's fat. He's going to, sink, if not sink the boat, slow down the progress of getting to some kind of solid land again." And on the bright side, it's Mac is actually a threat to the souls and the morale of the crew itself. So that's the two end. Either way, Mac is a threat. Both the intellectual and the moron agree for different reasons. And so it's very interesting that Mac is, taking this tack, so to speak. And this is what I call the midwit dilemma, or the macrobian dilemma. Big problem for midwits. So how is Macrobius a traitor? Macrobius has been instrumental in the ruin of the younger generations that have come in after him. Now, what does this mean? What did they accuse Socrates of? Corrupting the morals of the youth. What did Socrates have the decency to do? Drink hemlock. Macrobius is still around. And that's the purpose Macrobius has on the fora as the resident boomer, like Kurt Doolittle, psyoping even people of his own generation into thinking he's smart. That's what Kurt Doolittle did for years. It's like, who would listen to Kurt Doolittle? It's like a guy like me has to come around and say the emperor has no clothes. But he doesn't understand half the books he's read. It happens sooner or later. It's very interesting to see the effect that individuals like Macrobius have had on the younger generations. And the effect is so pronounced and so profound that if the younger generations were ever became fully cognizant of it, it would lead to the immediate extermination of those individuals who foisted this living upon them or these problems upon them. For example, a lot of things have changed in the younger generation. I'm literally saving lives with all this information, because, for example, myself, I size up things and people's for a living. I don't know what is. It's very strange. You don't necessarily always transcribe what was there.
Yes, I do. I promise.
Uh huh.
Uh-huh.
Well, bottom line is, in the old South, in the antebellum period, I would have been a slave trader. And, that's why I have a Southern accent, which it's bizarre to me where Macrobius, and this is the example of the madness of crowds and just the general hysteria of contemporary society. And that's Macrobius, who is this rational man who believes in the logos and is Southerner, this proud Southerner, is now making fun of my accent. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. I mean, it doesn't even make the slightest bit of sense to me. Now, granted, it's all an act. Macrobius has never been south of the Mason-Dixon line for more than 48 hours. But that being said, and he definitely has tried to stay well away from the Mason and Dixon line, but to broadly proclaim his Confederate heritage, and then the first time somebody makes fun of him in a Southern accent, he's going to return fire by noting the accent, makes no sense to me. So, what's going on with the boomers psyoping other generations, to take advantage of them? It's basically, it's. I was talking about this the other day. Loss from Rammstein, or was it Rammstein, or is it Rammstein, or is it Rammstein, or is it Rammstein? Uh, Loss or less is more or less the anthem of Generation X. A lot of people don't realize that. And it's very interesting how the boomers have impacted Generation X and then the millennials and then the zoomers so profoundly. It's almost like they said one to another, let us actually make millennials smaller and weaker. In John Wayne movies, which boomers all love, he's the biggest guy in his movies. He's wearing those massive lifts, and all the other people, especially the younger understudy, is always a head shorter than him. How is that possible? Well, periodically people shrink, and yes, people are getting larger. Supposedly, Mexicans are getting larger. Supposedly, what's not increasing is size of hands and feet. If you'll notice, most millennials and Zoomers have very small hands and feet, comparatively speaking, to prior generations. And some people might say that's due to evolution, people using their hands and feet less for heavy labor and so forth and so on. But the fact of the matter is, the boomers have actually been trying to create weaker, smaller specimens that don't threaten them. And this is why the millennials, Generation X, and Zoomers all have smaller hands and feet than boomers. Very interesting. Because the boomers have a major obsession with size. Who's being the biggest? A lot of people stay fat just because if they lost weight, their arms would get smaller, And so the boomers have caused a lot of difficulty for people in contemporary society, and Macrobius has been part and parcel of this effort by his generation to destroy the younger generations, not only in his own family, but he has tried to impact the lives of literally thousands of people. Now, at no point in time have I ever seen Macrobius don sackcloth and ashes and fully, reminisce about things he might have done differently. He's always very certain that he's in the right. He's a typical boomer. He has made no mistakes in life by which the younger generation can profit. He's not remorseful or rueful about anything, including his divorce or two or multiple divorces. He's not been able to do anything well in life. He's failed at so many things like raising heterosexual children or getting divorced and marrying an Asian. Those are not things to be proud of. Those are things to be ashamed of. The fact that you couldn't stay married to a white woman and that you couldn't raise any heterosexual children. That's a major problem. And the thing about Macrobius is he has no remorse. He's always the hero of his boomer anecdotes. Have you noticed that? He's kind of a cross between Walter Mitty and the Baron von Munchausen. And so I was going to do a broadcast about the Lindstedt Doctrine and summarize it in brief, but I'm not going to do it today but I am going to compare Martin Lindstedt and Macrobius together, obviously the comparison is going to run in Pastor Lindstedt's favor. So like I said, I'm going to compare them. They're both boomers, but not every single boomer is a problem. Boomers like Macrobius are a big problem. And it's very interesting all the things that Macrobius and his associations with other midwits are trying to do. I suspect Macrobius of being a Freemason. I suspect him of actively trying to harm individuals within the circle of crust and on the fora. And you have to understand what the purpose of all this is. They suppress genius to control it. You think people who went through 68 years of tertiary education aren't up to something? Then I have a bridge in New Mexico to sell you, and it's not very big either. It leads to actually it might be Arizona. Leads to my ancestral town. We started it in 1890 or something like that. Now, you have to understand about me. I was talking about Macrobius in a generalized sense of what he is doing to destroy society by collaborating with evil. But I'm going to remind you all that, again, going back to the Kurt Doolittle situation, I am the Fed Finder General. A lot of people don't remember that. I am the Fed Finder General. And it's okay to be wrong sometimes, because even when I'm wrong about somebody who is a Fed, it's good to make an example out of someone who is suspicious. You know, it's good to do that. Think about this, though. You think Macrobius has your best interests at heart? Do you really? Do you really think Macrobius has your best interests at heart? I made the point the other day of all these sperm bank doctors who basically have 4,000 children out there because they arranged it that way specifically. And these are isolated cases. Yes, it's true, they are isolated cases. But the point of the matter is not about the sperm bank doctors. It is about people who are in specific positions to do things actively, who use those positions and the power that they confer to basically alter the futures and behavior of their underlings without their underlings necessarily knowing about it. Or it could just be random people in a lot of cases. So this is why I say Macrobius is up to no good all the time. You have to understand that life is about manipulation and experimentation if you're a sociopathic midwit. And, which I actually believe Macrobius to be. I actually believe him to be a sociopath. And that's why his family does not associate with him. After all boomers, all members of his generation are sociopaths to some degree. In a civilized society, Macrobius would probably be the head waiter somewhere, and he would be really good at mathematics and telling you your exact bill, and telling you what was in the ingredients, because he's probably embodied AI. He's like the robot in Get Smart. So I'm going to expostulate on a serious thing, because why go to I could talk about a lot of other things. I'm talking about Macrobius, and that is deadly serious, because it's going to impact your future. But on the other side of things, there's so many things I could be talking about instead of condemning Macrobius in the strongest possible terms for his provocative behavior. And why would I do anything else? Because you, my viewer, are largely an inanimate object. You have no political relevance and barely any sentience. So why would I waste my time talking to you? It's a complete waste of time. You know, Zero HP Lovecraft on Twitter uh, posted this video of a bear who'd been freed from his small cage where he'd spent all his life, and the bear could only walk in circles because the area of his cage had been a circle, and he just walked in a little circle all day. And the bear, when introduced to a larger, environment, was unable to break the routine of walking in a circle all day in a little circle. And what's interesting about this is, I think a lot of people in today's society, even people who want to break out of it, are stuck like that bear specifically. And people like Macrobius are instrumental in keeping them in their current places. Macrobius, the great Eagle Scout. Totally oblivious to the world around him. I've never been a scout of any kind, but I have done counter revolutionary activisms around these individuals, and I know them to be perpetuators of the status quo, which means that they are more dangerous than your enemies because they are in your ranks, like Macrobius, and they're specifically to betray you. And you see this happen. You saw it happen with the Boy Scouts. Look, Macrobius was presiding over a Boy Scout troop the whole time the Boy Scouts were falling apart. Does this not make any sense to you? Do you not understand the implications of what I'm saying? Now, I, on the other hand, had very minimal influence, but I managed to, do some successful counter-revolutionary activities, activisms, as we used to call it. Bill Ragno invented that term. What happened to your face, man? This was about Kevin, what's his name? What happened to your face, man? Oh, I was doing activisms and they blew up in my face. I was building this bomb, doing some activisms. You know, that's a Il Ragno take. So a lot of people in today's society lack the seek and destroy mentality as specified in the Bible. That's utter annihilation. So, they'll lose what they gained short term. So what I've helped people with was a waste of time because, my efforts have been in vain. I can't even talk about them, even though I know they're already in vain, but they're better than doing absolutely nothing, which is what Macrobius has done. Macrobius is like the prophet Balaam. When he can't do things one way, when he can't curse Israel, he's going to seduce them using all these Moabite whores. And Macrobius is an advocate for the American experience. I think that's quite obvious. You have to remember, what did Dugan say about Americanism? Pure Satanism. That is what America stands for. Pure Satanism. So the Boy Scouts were started to groom boys for war. A lot of people don't know that. One of the protestations of faith in the Boy Scouts is you have to attest your faith in the heterosexuality of Lord Baden Powell. This guy was definitely a heterosexual. You have to believe that. You have to worship a image of his likeness, and so forth and so on. People have to understand that the reason the Boy Scouts were, created was that wars are best prosecuted by pederasts. And, this is why you have to convert as many of these young kids into pederasts as you can so they can go through West Point and keep raping people all their lives in Afghanistan or whatever. So this is what happens. And as I said, getting back to the root of it is Macrobius' extreme sociopathy. Macrobius thinks calling me fat is going to get him somewhere. People have been calling me names. They've been calling me ugly, gay, shit skin for 20 years. And Macrobius, you think calling me fat is going to make a difference? But this is the character of the sociopath. Even when they get what they said they wanted, they can't enjoy it. They said, feel happiness is fulfillment, or these like the love of God itself. Because if you don't have it, you have a giant hole in the ground in your yard. But I'm going to reveal Macrobius's greatest secret. This is why he has time to post on the forum instead of instantly forgetting his grandchildren. People leave a sociopath, but they can never feel or enjoy or appreciate it. You know, and in regards to what a healthy society is, Lindstedt is pretty much a normal guy. In comparison to Macrobius, I said we'd compare one or two of them together and see which one came out in front, so to speak. It's funny that Macrobius spends so much time LARPing, whereas Pastor Lindstedt will fit comfortably into any time in the past. He's a pretty normal guy. Everybody wants to return to tradition, but they want to spend hundreds and thousands of hours helping public policy. They don't want to put the work in. Attending public policy meetings, serving as a party official, serving on elections, being election judges. They don't want to do any of that. They just want to show up and win prizes for losing. No one appreciates that kind of behavior by those folks. You know, if anything, it harshly and exponentially increases the hostility towards because they want to lionize people, want to lionize psychopaths and sociopaths like Macrobius, who haven't developed a coherent thesis after all these years. Now, to me, a thesis means you can write out why you are glad to be alive and defend that intelligently, which I know a lot of you can't do. To me, this is a thesis. And some would say, well, they don't want to lionize sociopaths like Macrobius who haven't developed a coherent thesis after all these years. Well, the bottom line is, you know, this entire gimmick is, meant to protect himself from the younger generation, which he has given ample, success, you know, and he has turned all of it down, so it's never gotten him anywhere. But he will be exposed. Stay tuned for part 2, in which I fully go in continuing on Macrobius. And we'll probably be posting that tomorrow night or Tuesday night. And I highly recommend that you continue what? No, it's not. I recommend that you like, share, subscribe, and donate now.